In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create keyframe animations using SceneForge's powerful timeline system. The timeline can be found at the bottom of the window by clicking the expand button down here. Now, if you've used any existing nonlinear editor, this may be very familiar to you. To add a timeline track, simply go to an object's expanded properties, which can be done by selecting the object, and then clicking this little arrow down over here, and then clicking the timeline button. This will add a new timeline track with no keyframes associated with it just yet. Now by default, every object will have a transform track. For example, this stand-in here also has a transform track, which is what's visible by default. So does this light. But it's worth noting that if you expand the timeline tracks, you can see that Dennis Pose does not have anything else, but the light does have tracks for intensity and temperature, and the camera has tracks for focal length, aperture, and focus distance. For now, we're just going to be focusing on the position, or the transform. To create a keyframe, all you have to do is move the playhead to the position you want to add the keyframe to. In this case, it's just going to be 0, and click this button. This adds a keyframe that you can move around that stores information about the position, rotation, and scale all in one. If I move the playhead over and move my object to another position and create another keyframe, you can see that simply as I scrub through, we have our animation between our two keyframes. I can move these around and even reverse them, completely retiming the animation like so. To play back the timeline, all I have to do is click the play button, and it'll play my animation like so. Now, SceneForge is not meant to be a full-featured animation software, and that's why it offers simplified controls that are perfect for creating animatics and pre-visualization. Now, if I wanted to adjust an additional property, let's say this light over here, rather than changing its position, I'm going to change just its rotation. I'm going to start out over here, and by the end of the rotation, the light will be pointing the other way. Now I also want to change the color of the light. To do that, we can expand to go to the expanded properties of the timeline track and add keyframes for intensity and temperature. I can add a keyframe at the beginning for a very warm temperature, and then add a keyframe at the end for a very cool temperature. It's worth noting that while you can adjust these keyframes, parameter track keyframes, like intensity and temperature, do not get adjusted as you scrub through. But if you play the animation, you can see the value changing as the timeline goes on. You can zoom in and out of the timeline by using this little pink scroll bar. It's a little hard to see on the recording, like that. Now by default, the timeline has a duration of 70 seconds, but you can change this by adjusting the properties over here. Additionally, if you record to the timeline, this duration will get updated automatically to ensure that you never have any animations cut off. If I turn on loop playback, and I click play, the timeline will wait until the end of the animation, and then at the position of the final keyframe, immediately loop back. I'm going to create a shorter animation like so to demonstrate this, a little more zoomed in. Like that. Now, if you go into shoot mode, right now our camera moves based on two keyframes. But if I wanted to record the motion of the timeline, I can delete those keyframes and press record. And now I'm recording the motion every 0.1 seconds based on the camera's position that I'm controlling with my keyboard. You can see that it created keyframes for that motion. So now, at the click of a button, I can play back my motion without having to control the camera manually. If I want to export this timeline to a video file, all I have to do is click Render Camera View, select my properties, and click Export Timeline Video. This will run an offline rendering process, which may be faster or slower than the actual timeline, depending on the options you set. This ensures that every frame is recorded fully, so in your final video you don't get any frame drops or stuttering. The start and end time of your recording is indicated by the render start and render end options here. If you specify 0 seconds, it'll go from the starting position of the timeline all the way to the end duration. So keep that in mind when exporting video. And that is a very high-level overview of the timeline animation system.